Back in the 1990s, Gatorade released a commercial campaign titled Be Like Mike, in which they promised their consumers, hey, if you drink Gatorade, you'll become like Michael Jordan. Turns out, Gatorade doesn't really improve your basketball skills, and it only fills you up with a bunch of sugar and electrolytes. Churches can be a little bit like Gatorade, in which they promise their people, hey, come here and you will become more like Christ. When in reality, all they fill their people up with is sugar and empty calories. How does somebody become more like Christ? Glad you asked. We're going to tackle it in today's video. Hey guys, I'm Ryan, the young adults pastor at Emmanuel Faith Community Church here in Escondido, California, and our channel exists to promote the way of Jesus with the heart of Jesus among 20-somethings. And so we would love it if you like, share, or subscribe this video. It really helps us out a ton. In this video, we're tackling how does somebody become more like Christ? Now, at face value, this question is pretty straightforward. But it turns out that a lot of people have approached this question differently and arrived at different answers. You might even be familiar with a bunch of different discipleship strategies, classes, or curriculum that your church or your ministry has gone through in the past. And while there's a lot of different good resources out there, we want to present just two simple things to get you started in your own relationship with Jesus. The first thing that we want to point out as we get started is seen in Acts chapter 4. It says in Acts chapter 4:13, when they, the religious leaders, saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. This passage is really significant for a couple of reasons. First, the disciples are leading the Christian movement after Jesus' ascension. He's no longer on earth. He has entrusted this movement to his followers, many of whom, as we're told in this passage, didn't even have an education. In light of that, we would have expected that this thing would have fizzled out from the very beginning. And yet, as the religious leaders saw, these men, Peter and John and the others, had been with Jesus. This made up for all of their lack of preparation, education, and prestige. They had been with Jesus. And we see all through the Gospels, Jesus prioritized spending a lot of time with his disciples. And they wrote the Gospel stories for the purpose of you experiencing Jesus for yourself. That's why the Gospels were written. And so when you read the Gospels, you're supposed to read yourself into the scene in order to experience the same things that the disciples did. When you start reading the Bible this way, it makes things so immersive and you're a character rather than just an observer. For instance, you might read yourself into being the adulterous woman found in adultery, in which Jesus forgives you publicly. You might also find yourself to be the leper who meets Jesus on the road and is healed miraculously. Or you might actually be Nicodemus, who doesn't understand a lick of what this guy says, and yet still has to know for himself. You see, the Gospels were written to experience Jesus and to be able to spend time with him. That's the first thing that you and I have to do if we're going to become more like Jesus. But this is where the analogy of athletes or sports is also very helpful. Because just as Michael Jordan spent hours upon hours of practicing, so too must you and I spend a life practicing the same things Jesus did. A great picture of this comes to us at the end of John's Gospel. Jesus is with his disciples, and it says in John chapter 13 that as Jesus is washing his disciples' feet, he says, I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. This same message is repeated often throughout the Gospels, just as in Luke chapter 10, verse 37, go and do likewise. And elsewhere, Jesus rebukes Peter at the end. He says, what is it to you that happens to any of these others? If I want him to live until I return, but you must follow me. And so what it really comes down to is that in order for somebody to grow to become more like Christ, they must spend time with him and they must spend time doing what he did. But what do you think? Feel free to comment below, like or share this video, and as always, we'd appreciate it if you subscribe for further content. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video.